Well, hey there, friends. I'm your host, Penny, and this is Criminally Nerdy. Oh, hello. How you feeling, Pumpkin? Aside from still mentally recovering from the Manson madness, things are pretty peachy over here in Pennyland. And by peachy, I mean the demons persist, but so do I. In podcast world, I wanted to give a big shout out to listeners Carrie and Nicole. Thank you guys so much for your support. It means a lot to me. I would also like to let you all know that I almost passed out when I saw that the podcast has now reached Australia and England. Absolutely blew my mind and made my whole fucking week and just, yeah, wow. Welcome new listeners and welcome back returning listeners. You guys are seriously all the fucking best. You rock and I appreciate you more than you will ever know. Just FYI, many of you have suggested cases for me to cover, and I wanted to let you know that I do look into each one. Some I've already gotten to, some I haven't gotten to yet, but they are on my schedule. And there are some that I don't feel confident in based on what I can find right now, but I'm keeping them on my list to, keep an eye out for, see if any news comes out, and if it's something that I can cover in the future. So please don't think you're being ignored, and please keep them coming. I want to know what you guys want to hear. This episode is airing on May 20th, which is, I shit you not, Be a Millionaire Day. It is also Pick Strawberries Day and Victoria Day. Victoria Day is a Canadian holiday that began in 1845 to celebrate Queen Victoria's birthday on May 25th. After she passed away, it was eventually moved to the Monday before so that our northern neighbors can enjoy a 3-day weekend celebrating the arrival of summer. So, call into work. Buy a lottery ticket. Celebrate summer by picking some strawberries. Tell your boss to do the same. They probably need to relax anyways. Speaking of Victoria, my favorite Victoria told me that she loves my excuses to call into work and that she might even start using them on her own boss. Being the business owner might be a bit of a problem for her, but she's pretty smart, so I think she'll figure out a way around it. And can we just talk about working for a second? I have a great job. I have a stable career, but I can't say that it's my dream because, like most people, I don't dream of working. But when I really sat down and thought about it, if I had a dream job, it would be this: researching and writing and talking about things I find interesting or funny. They didn't tell us about podcasting on career day, so I am late to the game. Maybe someday, right? Right. That's it. I'm manifesting it right now. Note to self, bookmark this episode. The case I have for you today was requested by Bet. In Bethesda, Maryland, 2 women were found inside of a luxury retail store in an upscale outdoor mall in Bethesda Row. Both had been attacked. One had been brutally murdered. The other was left bound, covered in blood, and barely clinging to consciousness when she was found. The level of violence shocked the community, whose residents considered it to be one of the safest in the state. It drew national attention when the grisly details were revealed. This is the Lululemon murder. Be warned, there are some details of this case that are extremely graphic. Some of my sources for this episode were Murderpedia, the podcasts Generation Y and Rotten, TV docu-shows Forensic Files 2 and Autopsy did episodes on this case, and the book The Yoga Store Murder by Dan Morse. I highly recommend it if you want a very detailed look into this case. Rachel Ertley arrived to open the Lululemon Athletica store that she managed just before 9 a.m. on what she expected would be a typical Saturday on March 12, 2011. If you don't know what Lululemon is, it's basically super fancy workout gear. Their big seller being yoga pants and leggings, which go for around $100 a pair. In 2011, they were ranked 4th in sales per square foot of floor space, coming in behind only Apple, Tiffany, and Coach. She walked past a line of people who were waiting outside of the Apple store next door. The iPad 2 had just been released the day before, and people were eager to get their hands on it. Many of them had already been in line for hours. When she reached the front door, she realized it was already unlocked, but she was the only person scheduled to open that day. She went inside for just a second before coming back out. Bystanders in the line noticed that she was visibly shaken as she was making a call. Ryan Haw was one of the people standing in line for the Apple store. He got out of line to ask Rachel if she was all right. She said something was wrong inside. The store was in disarray and she thought she could hear something in the back. He went in to check things out while Rachel waited at the door. He noticed that things were strewn about, mannequins were knocked over, and he thought he could hear a moan coming from the back. As he went further towards the back, he started to notice bloody footprints on the floor. The further he went, the more concentrated the bloody footprints became. He got to a purple door in the back hallway and saw blood seeping out from the other side. He tried to open the door, but it stopped against something. He looked in and saw a woman face down in a pool of blood. He called out to Rachel that there was a woman who needed help and she needed to call the police. While heading back to the front of the store, he passed the bathroom where he saw there was another body. It was of a young woman who had been zip-tied around her wrists and ankles with her hands above her head. She was covered in blood and had a gash on her forehead. She had a shirt tied around her neck, while her own shirt had been pushed up, exposing her stomach and her sports bra. Her yoga pants and underwear had either been ripped or cut at the groin to expose her genitals. She was in bad shape, but though being left for dead, she had survived the attack. Rachel was already on the phone with 911, so an ambulance arrived quickly and took the survivor to the hospital. Police arrived to tape off the scene while investigators were called. Veteran Detective Jim Drury, with 32 years of law enforcement experience, Dimitri Rubin, a bit of a newcomer who had been a homicide detective for just over a year, and Homicide Unit Supervisor Sergeant Craig Wittenberger were all on the scene just after 10 a.m. Rachel said that the two employees that had closed the night before were Jana Murray, a Caucasian woman, and Brittany Norwood, an African American woman. Based on the descriptions of the women, police presumed that their murder victim was Jana and their survivor was Brittany. 30-year-old Jana Murray had graduated from George Washington University with a bachelor's degree in science. She spent 5 years working for Halliburton. She didn't want to stay in the oil industry, though, as it didn't really align with any of her interests. She was working on not just one, but 2 master's degrees at Johns Hopkins University, one in communications and one in business administration, when she started working at Lululemon as a sales team leader. She loved to travel and had actually spent 2 years of her undergraduate studies at the St. Louis University in Madrid, Spain. She was beautiful and very active, outgoing, and loved adventure. She became interested in Lululemon after a friend introduced her to their products. Not only did they fit her lifestyle, but she was very interested in their grassroots marketing approach. 28-year-old Brittany Norwood was given a full-ride scholarship to Stony Brook University for soccer after being a star player in high school. She was petite and very fit. She enjoyed taking spin classes, yoga classes, and was working on getting certified to be a personal trainer. She was energetic and outgoing. Friends recalled that she was very sweet and funny. When she wasn't working or working out, she was spending time with her friends or her large family of 4 brothers and 4 sisters, who were all well-educated and successful. She had a taste for the finer things in life, which is what drew her to Lululemon. Though it was a pay cut from her previous job at the luxury hotel The Willard, which catered to high-ranking politicians and A-list celebrities, it fit her personality, lifestyle, and aligned with her goals. The examination of the scene revealed that there had been quite a struggle. A flat-screen TV had toppled off of a table and crashed onto the floor. Clothing and other items from around the store were knocked onto the ground. None of the Lululemon merchandise appeared to be stolen, but the 3 safes underneath the registers were open and had been emptied. Both women's bags with their personal belongings were found, but Jana's keys were missing and her car was not in the parking lot. Brittany's wallet was found not in her bag, but on the floor in the stockroom. Jana's body was at the end of a rear hall that led to a back door. There was blood splatter on the walls as high up as 6 feet, as well as all over a metal bookcase. There were bloody handprints on the wall where the victim had gone from standing to her knees to the ground. She had a gaping wound in the back of her head, a ligature around her neck. There was a red metal toolbox laying on her shoulder, and the back of her pants had been ripped open. They could see that this woman had been viciously murdered with what appeared to be several different items. some of which were likely in the assortment of tools that were laying around her body. This is just one of many heartbreaking details. Her body was found next to a back door with a push bar alarm which had blood on it. Forensics would later confirm that it was Jana's blood. She had almost made it out before being pulled back into the attack. And though the main alarm had been disarmed when the women came in, had she been able to push that push bar, the alarm would have sounded and help would have arrived. After detectives noted what they could see, forensic investigators came in to process the scene and Jana was sent for autopsy. The store didn't have security cameras, so getting any information they could from Brittany would be crucial. Detective Deanna Mackey was sent to the hospital to speak with her, while detectives on the scene began to canvass the area. Brittany had been escorted to the hospital by an officer so that her clothes and any other evidence found on her could be retrieved. He noticed that her face was covered in dried blood. She had multiple lacerations to her face, chest, stomach, back, and legs, as well as what appeared to be a defensive injury on her palm. She was shaking with fear. When Detective Mackey arrived, the first thing Brittany said, barely above a whisper, was, "How is my friend doing?" Detective Mackey knew that the other woman was dead, but she didn't want to upset Brittany any more than she already was. She said she would see what she could find out, but in the meantime, any information Brittany could give her that would help them catch whoever did this to her and her friend would be beyond helpful. She asked if she had to talk right then. Detective Mackey told her she didn't have to do anything she didn't want to, but then gently pressed, knowing that even a small detail could change the course of an investigation. Brittany agreed, and for 48 minutes, she told Mackey everything she could remember from the night before. She said that she and Jana had left the store around 9:45 p.m. after closing. Jana went to her car, and Brittany headed for the subway. While making her way to the station, she realized that she had forgotten her wallet at the store. She needed her wallet because it's her wallet, and it had her Metro card in it, so with no cash or Metro card, she couldn't get home. She wasn't a supervisor, so she didn't have a key to get back in. She called Jana, who was already on her way home. She told her that she'd left her wallet and asked if Jana would mind coming back to let her in to grab it. Jana said that she had actually forgotten her laptop, so it was no problem. She told Brittany to head back to the store and she would meet her there. A few minutes later, Jana pulled up and parked in front of the store. It was a no parking zone, but Brittany was already there waiting for her and she knew they wouldn't be in there long. The two went back in and disarmed the alarm, which the security company confirmed was at 10:05 p.m. Brittany recalls they didn't bother locking the door behind them because they were going to be in and out. They looked around for Brittany's wallet but couldn't find it, so Jana offered to let Brittany use her Metro card to get home. Brittany thanked her and they went to leave. Brittany said that the two men had either come in as they were leaving or had come in at some point while they were in the back and jumped out at them as they were leaving. She said that they were dressed in all black with ski masks covering their faces. Both had on gloves. One had a backpack. She recalled one was taller, 6 foot or above, and the other was closer to her height, which was 5'3". The taller one hit Jana in the face and drug her to the back by her hair. The shorter one threw Brittany to the ground and demanded that he give her all the money from the safes. After emptying them, he took her to the back of the store and raped her. She said at one point he had assaulted her with one of the store's wooden hangers. During this ordeal, the men were calling both of the women bitches, sluts, and whores. They also repeatedly called Brittany racial slurs, which I will not be repeating. Detective Mackey asked if there was anything else that she could give them to help find these men, and she said that though she couldn't see them, they sounded white. Detective Mackey relayed the information to the investigators at the scene. The size 14 shoe prints matched Brittany's description of a larger man. The crime was so vicious that it suggested it would have taken 2 people to wreak such havoc. The way the women's clothing had been ripped indicated a sexual assault. There was actually a wooden hanger, like the one Brittany described having been used on her, on the floor next to where her body had been laying. And the safes being emptied made it clear that a robbery had taken place. On the surface, it all made sense. The only store that had surveillance in the area was the Apple store next door. Employees were questioned, and they gave investigators all of the footage from their system. Detectives combed through it for hours and were shocked when they saw 2 men, dressed in all black, wearing something on their heads, with one wearing a backpack in the area around the time Brittany said they would have been there. I mean, damn, that's lucky. The police tracked them down quickly because they were actually seen walking in the same area. Two white men, one taller, one shorter, dressed in all black, were walking in the area when they were stopped and questioned by detectives. It was almost too perfect. Unfortunately, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. The two were dishwashers at a nearby restaurant. Their uniforms were all black. They were seen on camera that night as they were walking home after their shift. Their stories and alibis were corroborated, so they were eliminated as suspects. Meanwhile, the community was gripped with fear. Sales in the area dropped by half. Most avoided the usually busy shopping center, and no one wanted to be out after dark. Employees closing nearby stores walked to their cars in shifts. As they desperately searched for whatever monsters committed this crime, Lululemon offered a reward of $125,000. Federal Realty, the development owner of Bethesda Row, offered $10,000, and Crime Solvers of Montgomery County, Maryland, offered $1,000, totaling $136,000 in reward money for any information that would lead to the capture of these assailants. The tips came pouring in. One that seemed credible was about a homeless man named Keith Lockett. Keith stood out in the area because there weren't many homeless people in Bethesda. He was known for being at the same bar every night, except for the night of the murders. He had also been seen walking with a shorter man earlier, and it stood out to the regulars because they had never seen Keith with anyone. Keith was a bit unhinged. He didn't really have any friends. Not only did he likely suffer from some mental health issues and some potential issues with alcoholism, he was known for making unwanted sexual advances towards women. When police looked into Keith, it looked like they might have a real lead on their hands. He had an extensive arrest record. They found Keith at the hospital, where he had turned up on the night of the murders, covered in blood. He was immediately brought in for questioning. Keith said he had heard about the murders. Everyone in Bethesda had. By this time, the news had gone national. He maintained that he had nothing to do with the murders and that the blood and injuries that he had were from getting into a fight with another homeless man. Police tried to rattle him, but though he was scattered by nature, he never wavered in that he had nothing to do with the attack on Jana and Brittany. Police compared his DNA and found that not only was his DNA not found anywhere at the crime scene, but the blood on his clothes was not from Jana or Brittany. He was telling the truth, and the police were at another dead end. Or were they? Jana's autopsy had been done, and it told a chilling tale. When the autopsy technician first saw her body, particularly her face, they assumed that she had been hit by a car. She had been savagely attacked. She had suffered 331 injuries. It was the most the medical examiner had ever seen in a single case. The autopsy technician said through his career, including working with FEMA to help identify Hurricane Katrina victims, he had never seen a more horrific sight than that of Jana's battered body. Her skull had been fractured 13 times. Over 200 of those wounds were blunt force injuries, primarily to her head and neck. They were caused by at least 6 different items, including a claw hammer, a merch peg, which is an 8-pound piece of metal that is placed into brackets on the walls to hang clothes on, a wrench, 2 different box cutters, and a serrated knife. She had over 100 defensive wounds. Jana put up a tremendous fight for her life during this prolonged, torturous attack. And what's worst of all is that Jana lived through this entire attack. Blood evidence showed that she was still bleeding while being beaten and stabbed, meaning that her heart was still beating and she was still fighting. The fatal blow, which is what caused the gaping hole in the back of her head, was caused by a serrated knife. She was stabbed in the neck so forcefully that it severed her spinal cord, went through her skull, and into her brain. This stab killed her within seconds. Brittany had been released from the hospital and was questioned again about the incident, which is pretty common. Sometimes after the initial shock wears off, victims are able to remember more. Any little detail she could remember would help. Detectives were bound and determined that they were going to find the monsters who did this and put them away for good. During her second statement, she was still very shaken and was crying throughout. She had horrible survivor's guilt. She had been beaten, raped, robbed, and left for dead, all while hearing her coworker be attacked. She was traumatized. Brittany kept saying, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault." She was, however, able to remember that at one point, one of the attackers took her and pushed her down on Jana's body, taunting her, saying that the only reason she was still alive was because she was, quote, more fun to fuck. Brittany continued through sobs, saying, "There was so much blood. Just so much blood." Speaking of blood, Jana's car had been located. It was found parked 3 blocks away behind a farmer's market. Investigators assumed that the killers had moved it so that it wouldn't draw attention since it was parked in a tow-away zone directly in front of the store. It also fit why Jana's keys were missing. When processing it, they found blood inside the car and on a hat in the back seat. This was a potentially promising lead, so they sent it for testing to see if they could find a match. Meanwhile, forensic evidence was coming in from the store. Things that initially seemed to fit with the events and timeline given by Brittany were starting to stand out as just odd. First, there were the shoe prints, left by a size 14 men's Reebok shoe, which just so happened to be found in the store. Lululemon didn't sell shoes. When asked about them, Rachel confirmed that they were kept in the store for the purposes of hemming. Since athletic shoes are a different height, they kept a pair for customers to put on while having their pants fitted, and the larger size would fit most people. Though they matched the prints on the floor, at first glance, the shoes didn't appear to have any blood on them. Luminol testing, however, showed that they had been covered in blood and then cleaned. So the killer came in, took off his own shoes, put on a pair that he just so happened to find in the store, committed a vicious murder, and then cleaned them and put them back. Why not take them with you? Or if you're going to leave them there in this bloody, crazy, chaotic, messy scene, why bother cleaning them? There were other things that weren't making sense, like the weapons. Every weapon the attackers used was found in the store, most from the toolbox and a knife from the break room. Even the zip ties that were used were found in the store. Detectives noted that the zip ties weren't out in the open, they were in a small box in the back room. How would the killers know to go to that specific location to get the zip ties? Maybe they forced one of the women to tell them. It wasn't just what they were finding at the scene that threw them off, it was what they weren't finding. The only blood belonged to Jana and Brittany. Both of these women had fought hard. How had they not managed to draw a single drop of blood from either of their attackers? They were about to get lucky, because the forensic evidence from the blood found in Jana's car had come back, and they did find a match that helped all the pieces start to fall into place. Detective Reuven had a gut feeling from the beginning, but he kept his theories to himself. If he said what he was thinking out loud, it could ruin his career. Hell, it could ruin the careers of everyone involved in the investigation. But the blood evidence they found in Jana's car gave them the push they needed to start looking into someone they had suspected from the very beginning stages of the investigation. The day the investigation started, while getting the surveillance footage, everyone who worked the night before at the Apple store was interviewed. They said they actually had heard noises on the other side of the wall. They heard shouting and crashing. They heard someone say, "Don't do this, please. Talk to me. What's going on? Please help me." At one point, employees can be seen on video standing next to the wall listening. The manager called the security guard over to listen, and he banged on the wall like you would do with a neighbor who you wanted to turn their music down, and the noises stopped. He assumed it was just, quote, drama, and never called the police. Which, just fucking call the police. That's their job. Drama or not, you hear crashing and shouting, and at one point someone says, "Please help me." Fucking help. What's the worst that can happen? Really? Through the statements of the manager, employees, and security guard from the night before, they all said they heard 2 women's voices, but no male voices. Now that they had the match on the blood in Jana's car, it was time to go talk to Brittany again. Detectives asked Brittany if she knew what Jana's car looked like or if she'd ever been in it. She said she had seen it, but she'd never been inside. They asked again, "Are you sure? She never gave you a ride home? You two never went to lunch together?" And Brittany said no, she'd never been in Jana's car. Then they asked, then why was your blood found in her car? That's right, the blood in Jana's car belonged to Brittany. And the hat? Not only did it have Brittany's blood on it, but it belonged to her. She had left her blood-stained hat in Brittany's car in the frenzy of it all. Brittany fumbled and just gave absolutely no explanation at all and just left. She wasn't being held, so she literally just left. This was no smoking gun, but it surely had investigators narrowing in. They also took a closer look over his injuries from the attack. All of the cuts to her body were superficial. How could one be absolutely mutilated while the other one got away with minor injuries? When they took a look at the angle, the depth, the placement of all of her cuts, they realized they were self-inflicted. Again, just as important as what they did find is what they didn't find. There was no blood on the back of the shirt, even though she had been laying on her back bleeding for hours. It should have been soaked. That's how gravity works. And remember the vicious rape that Brittany suffered? Examination showed that neither Brittany or Jana had been sexually assaulted. Before they could bring her back in to go over the evidence, Brittany made a surprising move. She called investigators and said she had something to tell them. She voluntarily came in the next day with her brother and sister. In her fourth interview, she told detectives that the attackers had made her move Jana's car. She said they were going to watch her and that if she spoke to anyone or did anything to draw attention to herself, they would kill her. Detectives asked, "Did either of the attackers go with you?" She said no. They asked, "Why didn't you just drive away? Drive to the police station?" She said they had her wallet so they knew where she lived. She didn't want them to come to her home, where she lived with her sister, and kill her and her family. Possibly plausible, but sketchy at best. "So you then walked 3 blocks back to the store with blood all over your face and clothes and no one stopped you?" She said no. This is a busy area on a Friday night. No one asked a young woman who was clearly terrified and covered in blood if she was okay or needed help? All right. She stuck by her story and then asked if she could go home. But detectives weren't having it. They flat out told her they knew there was something she wasn't telling them. Brittany wouldn't say anything more, so they left her in the interrogation room and went to talk to her brother and sister. They presented her siblings with the evidence they had, hoping that they could go talk to Brittany. Maybe she would be more likely to open up to one of them. Brittany's sister completely broke down when they told her everything. Her brother Chris, however, remained more composed. They decided it would be best to send Chris in. When he goes to talk to Brittany, he keeps asking her if it's true. She tells him she just wants to go home. He tells her, "Look, I don't think you're gonna get to go home. I saw what they have, and I acted like I didn't believe it, but it's not looking good. You need to let me know what happened." He even tells her that he'll get her a defense attorney. Through their conversation, Brittany keeps asking him if the detectives can hear them. He says, "No, I checked. I didn't see any recording devices." Like, bro, what? You are in a police interrogation room. They are 100% listening and probably watching. What world are you living in? Chris keeps trying to get to the bottom of what happened. He asks many times if they had gotten into an argument or if Jana had attacked her and she was acting in self-defense. Brittany says repeatedly she had just forgotten her wallet. She said she doesn't want to disappoint anyone. His questions then take an interesting turn when he says, "Did she catch you stealing?" Why would he ask if she was caught stealing? Seems a bit out of left field and kind of inconsequential compared to the gravity of the whole being a murder suspect thing. It turns out Brittany Norwood had a long history of stealing dating back to high school. Though often suspected, no one could ever prove that she had stolen things from them, so she never faced consequences for it. Until college. Brittany had received a full scholarship to Stony Brook College to play soccer. Over the years, there were multiple complaints from her teammates about things going missing. $10 here or there, a tube of lip gloss, a shirt, a necklace, just small things. Things that seemed not even worth someone's time to steal. So several just chalked it up as maybe they misplaced it or dropped it somewhere. But her teammates and coaches noticed that the only times things went missing were when Brittany was around. It all caught up with her senior year when she was finally caught. She was kicked off the team, which caused her to lose her scholarship. She left Stony Brook just 11 credits shy of graduating. But she lied to everyone and told them that she had graduated, but there was some issue with her student loans and it was holding her up from receiving her diploma. For a while, she dated a dentist named Maury. Maury would later say that during their relationship, she stole from him on multiple occasions and would physically assault him. This actually is what led to the end of their relationship. After they broke up, Brittany kept contacting him. One day, Brittany texted him and said that she was coming over. He ignored the text and left the house. When he and his new girlfriend, Marjorie, returned, they found several of Marjorie's things missing. Clothes, perfume, diamond earrings, a watch, checks from her checkbook, her house keys, her car keys, and her cell phone. Maury and Marjorie filed a restraining order against Brittany with the police, and in addition to requesting that all of the stolen items be returned, they requested that Brittany undergo psychological testing. The judge ordered Brittany to stay away from them both for 2 weeks while the case was reviewed. She voluntarily signed an agreement that said she would not contact the couple for a year, but denied the allegations of theft. She then violated the restraining order by showing up at Maury's work. A hearing was ordered, but Brittany never showed. A bench warrant was issued, but apparently those type of bench warrants are only acted on if you're detained for something else. This type of warrant also expires after a year, which I didn't even know was a thing, but that's what happened for Brittany, so she lucked out. It never showed up on later background checks because it wasn't outstanding. Brittany began working at the Lululemon Athletica store in the Georgetown district because she loved everything it offered. She had a taste for the finer things. She always had. She knew luxury. And though it only paid $11 an hour, it offered lots of benefits that appealed to her. Not only did the company pay for their health insurance, employees were given free yoga classes and memberships to fitness clubs. While working at this store, history began to repeat itself. Employees were noticing their personal items and small amounts of cash were going missing. Registers were coming up short. Brittany tried to throw them off the scent by saying that she'd had things go missing too, but it was unmistakable that these thefts were only occurring when Brittany was working. Though suspicious, they had no proof. Employees were able to purchase merchandise at a discount on a regular basis, but once a year they had an employees-only shop night where employees got a 70% discount. That is a very steep discount. That's like wholesale. So the company capped it at $1,000 worth of merchandise per employee. During the event, Brittany asked her manager if she could go over the limit. The manager figured she was talking about a reasonable amount, so she agreed. Brittany was not talking about a small amount. She more than doubled it. She racked up almost $2,200 in merchandise. The manager felt like her generosity had been taken advantage of, and she now even more strongly suspected Brittany of the recent thefts. During her next shift, the manager called Brittany in and fired her for discount abuse. Brittany was crushed. She saw Lululemon as more than just a job, but as a way into the high-end health clubs where she would make connections with those that she would recruit to be her clients once she became a personal trainer. Brittany complained to the regional manager that she had been singled out. She even threatened to contact a lawyer. Lululemon did not want this kind of negative publicity, so after an internal investigation, they overturned the manager's decision to fire Brittany and reassigned her to the Bethesda Row location. Rachel knew all about Brittany's reputation when she arrived, so it came as no surprise when people started reported personal items missing. She was so bold that once one of her co-workers was wearing some Vera Wang perfume, and Brittany told her that she loved the way it smelled, so her co-worker, being kind, spritzed some on her. Like, that's so sweet. The next day, when her co-worker went to grab her perfume, she noticed it was missing from her bag. She didn't know about Brittany's reputation, so she didn't think much of it. She assumed she'd taken it out or left it at work or somewhere around her house. It wasn't until her next shift with Brittany when things clicked. In retail, a common policy is to do a bag check. This is where, before you leave, another employee glances into your purse or lunchbox or backpack or whatever to make sure you haven't stolen anything. The girl with the missing perfume just so happened to be the one to do Brittany's bag check during her next shift and saw the very same perfume in her bag. She didn't say anything to Brittany, but she reported it to Rachel immediately. The night before the murders occurred, Rachel had a meeting with all of the other supervisors, including Jaina, to discuss her concerns about Brittany. They all agreed that since they didn't have proof, they would need to pay close attention so they could catch her in the act. One of the supervisors actually suggested getting a nanny cam. Brittany knew her time was running out. It wouldn't be long before she was caught and fired. Thankfully, she had recently interviewed at an upscale fitness center called Equinox. And when I say upscale, I mean upscale. I looked up pictures of this place and damn, you could rent it out for events. And I don't know, maybe they do. If not, someone call their marketing department. They're missing a golden opportunity. The interview went well, and Brittany actually received a call that she was being brought in for a second interview the following Monday. This would be a huge step in the right direction for her personal training career, so landing this job was of the utmost importance. Jaina wasn't even supposed to be working on March 11th. She had switched shifts with someone else. She and Brittany closed the store and checked each other's bags before leaving, as usual. When Jaina looked into Brittany's bag, she saw a pair of leggings that still had the tag on them. Jaina asked her, "Did you buy those today?" knowing she hadn't sold them to her. Brittany said yes, she had purchased them from another employee, but she had thrown away the receipt. Jaina was going to look it up in the system, but everything had already been shut down, so she told Brittany they would just deal with it tomorrow. Jaina immediately called Rachel to tell her of her suspicions. She said that she needed to look it up as soon as she got in the next day if Brittany had actually purchased those leggings. Spoiler alert, she had not. Meanwhile, Brittany was in panic mode. She knew that this would mean she was going to get fired, and she couldn't have that stain on her record with her dream job of Equinox just within reach. She didn't have Jaina's number, so she called another employee to get it, again saying that she'd forgotten her wallet and needed to get back into the store. The other employee she called actually said, "Why don't you call Rachel? She lives just across the street and can come let you in." Brittany made up the excuse that Jaina was already there and it would be easier to just call her, so the employee gave Brittany Jaina's number and the two wound up back at the store. Once inside, investigators believed Brittany delivered the first blow to the back of Jaina's head with one of the 8-pound merch pegs. This hit alone would have caused her neurological damage, so she was likely disoriented and unable to defend herself as well as she could if she were at full capacity. This didn't stop her, though. Jaina fought until her last breath, but Brittany's attack was merciless. After Jaina was dead, Brittany then moved her car. Not only because it was in a tow-away zone, but because if Rachel happened to look over and see that Jaina's car was still there, she might get worried and come check on her. Brittany then spent what they believed to be 1 to 2 hours in Jaina's vehicle coming up with her plan. She returned to the scene where she spent hours trying to stage the scene to fit her story. She put on the men's shoes and walked around in Jaina's blood. She washed off the shoes and the knife. She also washed Jaina's blood off of herself. She cut holes in both her and Jaina's pants to support the sexual assault storyline. She inflicted the superficial cuts to herself. The last thing she did was zip tie herself, using her teeth to tighten the ones around her wrist. They were able to prove this in court because they retrieved every zip tie from the scene and it was the only one that had teeth marks on it. Finally, she laid down on the bathroom floor, in blood, and waited for someone to discover the scene. Brittany was arrested for Jaina's murder on March 18th, just 1 week after it took place. Jaina's family found out about it on the way to Jaina's memorial. They were absolutely crushed and enraged. When Brittany was in the hospital, they felt really bad for her and they offered to send her flowers, but she said she didn't want them. They told her not to feel bad, that this wasn't her fault, not to let the survivor's guilt get to her. They even thanked her for doing what she could to help their daughter. All of this to find out that this fucking low-life piece of shit was the one who actually took her away from them. Brittany spent 7 months in jail awaiting trial, during which time all of her phone calls were recorded. You want to know what she was concerned about? It wasn't remorse. It wasn't how bad she felt about what the Murray family was going through. It wasn't concern for her own family, who was reeling with disbelief and horror at what she had done. It was about her fucking hair and nails. She was upset about the way they looked and that she didn't have access to better products. Are you kidding me? You just brutally murdered someone and you're upset because you don't have high quality products? It's not a fucking spa, it's jail. Bitch, I hope your hair falls out. And your fingernails. And your toenails. Hope you look as ugly on the outside as you are on the inside. Prosecutors offered Jana's family the option of letting Brittany have a plea deal so they wouldn't have to sit through a trial. They knew that if there was a trial, the family would have to hear every detail of what happened to Jana that night. The family refused the offer. They said they had to know. They also knew that a plea deal would be a lesser punishment, and they wanted the maximum amount of justice for Jana. It took the jury less than an hour to come back with a verdict of guilty on the charge of first-degree murder. Judge Robert Greenberg described her as cold-blooded, brutal, calculated, deliberate, devious, and malicious. He said, quote, "I have no doubt that you are a deeply troubled woman. My sympathy for your plight does not begin to approach what I feel for the Murray family." Brittany pled for mercy, but the judge was having none of it. He said, "The savagery of this killing is nothing short of astounding to me." He said, "You are one hell of a liar, ma'am," and then sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jana Murray was only 8 weeks short of finishing her 2 graduate degrees. Afterwards, she was hoping to move up and work at the Lululemon head office in Sumner, Washington, which is where she was already planning to move to be with her long-term boyfriend, Frazier. Frazier had been planning to propose as soon as she was done with school. In his victim impact statement, he said, quote, "No longer can I look forward to our children, praying that they have Jana's smile and indomitable spirit." The Lululemon store in Bethesda put up a colorful mosaic stained glass window with the word love on their storefront in Jana's memory, as well as a photo of Jana in a yoga pose prominently displayed. 7 years later, the store moved to a new location, and the window wouldn't fit, so the company paid to have the window shipped to her brother Hugh. I'm not crying now, but I cried real tears when I read that the first time. Jana's family also established the Jana Troxell Murray Foundation. The foundation will have a scholarship program that is designed to help assist qualified individuals in having access to the same programs in which Jana participated and which played an important role in her life, making her the special person she was. And that, my friends, is the unbelievably tragic case of the Lululemon murders. That's all I have for you today, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Like next week when we take a deep dive into a Canadian serial killer who is able to hide his crimes with the help of his farm. Please make sure to drop a 5-star wherever you're listening. It really helps the podcast. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Criminally Nerdy Podcast, Twitter, X, whatever you call it, at Crime Nerd Pod, or shoot me an email anytime at criminallynerdypodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, keep it nerdy. I'm away downtown, walking fast, faces pass, and I'm homebound. Muddled. God, this pisses me off. Why do I keep saying fucking footy? Yo ho, my poodle. You know what to expect by now. Oh, already? Motherfucker. Merchandise. That's a word. TM. Yeah, fuck it. Assistant to the regional manager. That ain't. I'm gonna cry again. Sage. She needs to sage that shit.